Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Jaded Blossom's August medical release is now available and there are so many fun products. Here's a quick look at the August release, and you can always save by purchasing the entire release bundle. First up, we have the stencil set Medical Supplies. This is currently the freebie you'll receive if you purchase at least $50 worth of product, and one item must be from the new release. This is for a limited time or while supplies last. There's a second stencil set. This one's Bandaid Stencil. There are 3 layers. One has the hearts, the other has the base of the Band-Aid, and the last one has the little polka dots for the center of the Band-Aid. There's a new sentiment stamp set with coordinating outline dies. This is called Scrub Life. Lots of great sentiments, and many of them are perfect for thanking healthcare workers. Jaded Blossom always has amazing sentiment stamp sets, and I love having the coordinating dies. Now moving on to the die sets, there's a new Gnome add-on set. This one's called Medical. There are tons of dies in this set, 58 pieces. It includes the medical jacket, there's a nurse hat, there's the little light to put on the hat, doctor's or a nurse's bag, an x-ray of the rib cage, and a little heart you can add on there. There's a syringe, a thermometer, pill bottles, lots of really fun images. And if you're not a gnome fan, you could still use most of those images without the gnomes. The next die set is a new Embellishment Cluster set. This one's called Medical. Jaded Blossom's original Embellishment Cluster was an idea that I brought to Jaded Blossom, and I guess it was super popular, so now they've released a medical Embellishment Cluster set. So fun. The great thing about the Embellishment Cluster die sets is that 6 of those images are all welded together, so you can quickly cut out multiples, use them for embellishments, or maybe for shaker fillings. The next die set is Gnome Dies Awareness Ribbon Add-on Set. There are 2 different ribbons for the gnomes to hold, the traditional awareness ribbon, a heart awareness ribbon, and 3 different sizes of the smaller ribbons that you can use for embellishments. And this is another set you don't have to use with the gnomes. You could just ignore the 2 pieces with the little hand hold pieces and instead use the individual ribbon images. The final die set is called Photo Frame. So it includes the Polaroid frame and 5 different sentiments. Thanks, friend, hello, smile, and hi. And I love that the frame and also the inside portion of the frame plus the sentiments all have the fun faux stitch detail. If you are interested in any of the products from the new release, I do have links in the description box below. I do have a few cards to share using the new release. I've already gone ahead and stenciled the background of some pattern paper. This is a collection from Minte. I don't remember the name since I've already used the front cover. They always have a pattern on the back. But I've had this paper pad for years, so I'm pretty sure it's retired. For a little extra detail and shine, I'm adding some Love from Lizzie peel-offs at the bottom of this panel. This is the brown color with gold overlay, so it's super shiny. I'm using the widest and also the medium width. I'll wrap the ends around the back, put ATG tape on the back, and layer this piece on some dark brown cardstock. Now I'll put adhesive on the back and add my card front onto a card base. All of my cards in this video are American Standard A2 size, 4¼ inches by 5½ inches. I'll be adding one of the photo frames, and I use some Doodlebug Design petite print pattern paper for the frame. On the back side, I have some double-sided adhesive tape, and I'm adding a piece of vellum. I still want to be able to see some of the fun Band-Aid design through the frame, but I also want the gnome to stand out against the background. After adding the vellum piece, I'll pop up that frame using foam dimension. This is the 1/8 inch strips from scrapbook.com in the 1mm thickness. Perfect size to fit around the narrow edges of the frame. I had a few of those narrow strips stuck together, so I'll just add them at the bottom of the frame. And I'll fill in that bottom portion of the frame with more of the foam dimension. Want to make sure there aren't any areas that sag. Adding one final piece. I'm not adding it to the card yet, so I'll set aside the card and the frame and start assembling the gnome. I've already die cut out all of the pieces, and I have them stored in one of scrapbook.com's stack and sort trays. These are great when you're doing a lot of die cutting and don't want to lose all those tiny pieces. And you can purchase multiple trays and stack them together. I'll start with the medical coat. I cut out all of the pieces from the same teal color. If you want your gnome to have a different color shirt underneath the jacket, that background piece, I would use a different color. Or if you want that piece to be their skin, you can use one of the skin tone cardstock colors. Most of that V section will be covered up, so I really wasn't concerned. This will be a girl gnome, so I'm adding her face on top of the jacket. Before adhering the face down, I'm adding a small scrap piece of cardstock just at the very top of that V section of the jacket. That way the center of her face doesn't dip down. And you can use any cardstock color for this since it will be covered up. Now I'll assemble the nurse's hat. I use white cardstock for the background piece, that front area, and red cardstock for the medical cross. I'll put a little bit of glue on the back of the nurse's hat and attach it on the gnome's head. Once that glue dries, everything will stay in place, but for now, I'll flip it over, add some double-sided adhesive tape on the back. And that'll just help secure it until the glue dries. For the nose, I will be popping it up using some thin foam dimension. This is scrapbook.com's small foam squares in the 1mm thickness. Put two pieces on the back and adhere it in the center of the gnome's face. This nurse will have brown pigtails. Put a little bit of glue just on the top portion of the hair and adhere it underneath the hat and right next to the nose. She'll be holding a box of tissues. The main box will be light blue, and I use some white shimmer cardstock for the tissue. Just glue all three of those pieces together. I use the same light blue cardstock color for that background piece, but you can use any color since it will be covered up. The background pieces are there, so it's easy to assemble the different images. I did add a small red heart on the front of the tissue box. Then I'll glue her hands on the right and left side. I will be popping up the tissue box using more foam dimension. This is the same 1mm foam. I cut one of the squares in half so I could fit it behind her hands just on the back side. Since I have all of those layers for the tissue box, I'll add a second piece of foam behind her hands and then just a regular piece of foam behind the tissue box. I'm not adding the tissue box in front of her yet. I almost forgot to add the bows, so I did go and cut out a couple of tiny red bows using some specialty cardstock. Just glue those in place. You may be wondering, why does this gnome not have any feet? Well, you'll only see the top portion of her body. I'm adding her inside the photo frame. After determining the placement, I'll use a pair of scissors and trim off the very bottom portion of the gnome. I'm trying to do a very straight cut so it'll sit along the edge of the photo frame. Now I'll flip over the frame and I'm adding more foam dimension in the very center, just in the area where my little gnome will be. I don't want the foam to be visible from the front, so I'll hold the gnome in front of the frame, and that way I can determine where to add those foam pieces. Now I'll remove the release paper, attach the photo frame on my stencil background, and I'm putting it at a slight angle. Next, I can add the gnome inside the photo frame. I'll remove the release paper from the double-sided adhesive tape. And I will add some foam dimension on the back of the gnome, but just behind the nurse's hat and her hair. Behind the main body of the gnome, I'm adding glue. The gnomes always end up with lots of cardstock layers, so I'm only adding the foam at the top since there are more cardstock layers at the lower portion of the gnome. Now remove the release paper and adhere my little nurse gnome inside the photo frame. And I'll place a large acrylic block on top for some added weight while the glue dries. Now I'll remove the release paper from the tissue box and adhere it in front of the gnome. I'm adhering the tissue box at a slight angle, and I have the lower right-hand corner of the box below the top portion of the photo frame. I've already stamped and cut out the sentiment, "Get well soon, Gnomey," and I stamped it on the same pattern paper that I use for the stencil background. Put glue on the back and adhere it at the bottom of the photo frame. For embellishments, I'm using the original Embellishment Cluster die set. I selected the hearts, using the largest and the medium-sized heart. I cut these out from some gold iridescent cardstock. I'll add 2 hearts in the upper left-hand corner of the photo frame and 1 heart on the right side of the sentiment. For a final finishing touch, I'll use a white gel pen and add a few highlights on her nose, the tissue box, and the little heart on the tissue box. I think my white gel pen is dying. I have to keep scribbling it off on some scrap paper so it flows nicely. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. The second card, I used the same pattern paper for the background, but completely changed the ink colors. I have a pink Band-Aid with a purple heart. I love how this first set of cards turned out. The Bandaid Stencil set is one of my favorites from the release. For card design number 2, I'm using Jaded Blossom's Diagonal Card Matte Die, and the pattern paper is Doodlebug Designs Happy Healing. This pack was a limited edition that was only available at scrapbook.com, but the Happy Healing paper is available in 6x6 and 12x12. I used some teal cardstock for the frame and 2 of the pattern papers. One of them has lots of different medications and the other is a yellow with white polka dots. I'll flip over the frame, put some double-sided adhesive tape on the back side, very carefully pick that piece up, and yes, some of that tape is a little wrinkled, but once I add all the pattern paper pieces inside and remove the release paper, it'll completely flatten out. Now I'll inlay the 5 pattern paper pieces. 3 of the pieces on the background will feature the cute little medication pattern paper. Doodlebug Design always has the cutest pattern paper, and many times Jaded Blossom does carry their paper and embellishments. On their website, it's under the Fun Extras category. Once I have the final die cut piece in place, I'll flip over the frame, remove the release paper, and I'll add this piece on some white shimmer cardstock. Now I'll put ATG tape on the back and add my card front onto a card base. Now it's time to assemble the Dr. Gnome. This will be a boy gnome. For the background piece of the gnome, I use white cardstock, and all of that will be covered up. The gnome will have a brown beard, brown mustache, For his hat, I used the tone-on-tone pattern paper with the little heart, and this is part of the Happy Healing collection by Doodlebug. I'll put glue on the back of the mustache, adhere it down. Next, I'll add the nose, and I will pop it up using some thin foam dimension. I'll also add a foam dimension for both of his feet. I know this is not a very safe doctor since he's going into work barefoot. And there are shoe options for the gnomes, but I think their bare feet are just adorable. Next, I'll add the light on the top of his hat. I use light blue cardstock for the band, a teal cardstock for that larger circle piece, and for the very center, I use some silver holographic cardstock. This gnome will have a stethoscope. I use some of Doodlebug Designs Petite Prints. This is the dark charcoal. Hard to tell, but it does have tiny little polka dots on it. I'll use some of the teal cardstock for that top band of the stethoscope and a silver mirrored cardstock for the very bottom piece. I didn't think about it when I had the gnome with the bare feet, but when you place the stethoscope in front of the gnome, that very bottom piece that you would put on the person's chest to listen to the heart ends up right on top of his foot. If you use the doctor's coat with the shoes, it ends up more on the side. So when I use this stethoscope again, I think I would do it with the doctor's coat. It looks a little odd right on top of his foot. I am popping up the stethoscope using more foam dimension. And I will need to cut some narrow pieces of foam. I'll put glue behind the area that goes into his ears. Not that this gnome actually has any ears. Then I'll adhere this stethoscope in place. I've already stamped and cut out the sentiment. Not all angels have wings, some have stethoscopes. Using the outline die, I cut out a second piece from some teal iridescent cardstock. I'll glue the two pieces together, offsetting them slightly, so I have this beautiful sparkly drop shadow underneath the sentiment. I'll be adding the gnome image on an oval die cut. I use Jaded Blossom's stitched oval die cut and also their Scallop Oval die set. For that scallop die cut, I use some vellum. I don't want to completely cover up the fun background. I'll glue the oval onto the Scallop Oval. Now I'll flip over the gnome, put foam dimension on the back, using some slightly thicker foam dimension behind the top of his feet. Since the feet are already popped up with foam dimension, I need just that little extra lift. I'll remove the release paper, adhere the gnome at the very bottom of the oval. Now I'll put glue on the back, making sure only to put glue behind the stitched oval and not the vellum oval. Don't want the glue to show through on the front. And I'll adhere the oval with the gnome on the right side of the card. I'll also add foam dimension behind the sentiment, remove the release paper, and adhere it in the upper left-hand corner. For embellishments, I use the Medical Embellishment Cluster die set. Cut out 3 of the medicine bottles. These are all just single pieces, but I want to add a little extra color. So I'm using a silver paint marker and coloring just the caps of the medicine bottles. Now I'll add 2 of the medicine bottles on the left side of the gnome and 1 on the right side. The paint does take several minutes to dry, so I'm trying to be really careful and not touch it. I think these are really fun for embellishments, but I also think it would be great to use for shaker fillings. Although in this video, I didn't make a shaker card. For a final finishing touch, I'll use a white gel pen and add highlights on the gnome, his little light, the stethoscope, and the tiny medicine bottles. I did pull out a scrap piece of cardstock so I could get that white gel pen flowing. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. Since I cut out the background using the diagonal card mat die, I had the same pieces just in the opposite placement. So I figured I may as well make two. That gnome is holding one of the medicine bottles, and I added a cute little smiley face using Jaded Blossom's Foodie Gnomes stamp set. And I use a black pen for the RX label. And for a sentiment, I used Doctor's Gnome Best. I did make 4 more cards using the new release, but I didn't record a process video. I had to make a card using the giant syringe. The pattern paper is from Echo Park's First Responder collection. This is the same paper collection I used with Jaded Blossom's Firefighter and Police releases. The size of this syringe compared to the gnome is absolutely terrifying. So if you ever have a nurse coming in to give you a shot or draw blood with a syringe this size, you should probably run away. This next card features the awareness ribbon, and I did a green ribbon. I think the green ribbon stands for several different things, but for my card, it's focused on Glaucoma Awareness Month, which is in January. I always try to make a glaucoma card for my eye doctor so he can display it in the office during January. It's been a while, but I used to share a video every January focusing on glaucoma awareness. I was diagnosed with glaucoma in my 30s, so I want to make sure people are getting tested and not assuming you can only get glaucoma when you're older. Now here's another look at the 6 cards I made using Jaded Blossom's brand new medical release. This release is perfect for thanking healthcare workers. You can make some really adorable get well soon cards. It also has the awareness ribbon die set. So this is a great release for year round. If you are interested in any of the products, I do have links in the description box below. And I have 2 bonus cards. I don't have them on hand since I've already given them out to some healthcare workers. Very recently, there was a medical emergency for one of my family members, and they were in the hospital for over a week. They're okay now, recovering in rehab. The doctors and nurses at the hospital were absolutely amazing, so I made these cards before even recording this video so I could thank them. I made sure to quickly photograph the cards, but I couldn't include them on my final card picture featuring all of the cards I made using the new release. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.